extemporaneous notes, and that is incredibly important. But when it comes to the political jury of public opinion, the people who are predisposed to believing President Trump probably are still going to do that. The other thing that I found, and you also mentioned this, extraordinary, isn't just that James Comey admitted that he asked a friend of his to give the contents of his memos to the New York Times, but that he said that he did it because he wanted to spur a special counsel. We've said before, he might not be a Democrat, he might not be a Republican, but boy, is this guy political. To sort of have the wherewithal to do that and to sort of think 10 steps ahead and want that to be the end goal, that just gives you a sense that he's not just a Pollyanna Boy Scout. He wants to affect something, and he wants to get to the point of something like that, and he knows exactly how to do it and use the institutions of Washington and of the media to make that happen.
Yeah, he certainly understands, Gloria Borger, how things work in Washington, and it worked for him. There is a special counsel.
That's right. Well, he wasn't born yesterday. He's been around Washington a long time, as Dana points out, and he chose his words carefully today. I mean, when he said in his opening that the president, they were defaming him, and he said those were lies, plain and simple. And then he went on to describe these meetings, Wolf, in which he made it very clear that when the president said, "I hope you can get rid of this investigation," or whatever the quote was, that he said, "I took it as a direction. This is what he wants me to do." Now it's up to the special counsel to decide whether, in fact, that constitutes obstruction, and perhaps it's up to the Congress in a political sense. But he also said, and he intimated this quid pro quo that he thought was going on the part of the president, which is, you asked Comey to stay, and you didn't get anything for it. And he said he asked for his loyalty in terms of the context of getting him to do what he wanted. In other words, you get to stay in your job if you behave the way I want you to behave. And I think that's pretty damning. He wouldn't comment specifically on obstruction because he did not want to do that. But I think when he said that he took this as direction and outlined this kind of quid pro quo, I think it's very damning.
And he said that the words from the president and other White House officials about why he had been fired were lies, plain and simple, and he wanted to get the record straight. He also said that Michael Flynn, the fired National Security Advisor, was in legal jeopardy.
Was in legal jeopardy, and later on he said he was asked specifically about his statements to the FBI. Do you have any reason to believe he gave false statements to the FBI? And he said that's one of the reasons he was under criminal investigation. A number of significant things. One, this won't get much attention because it's in the rearview mirror, but a pretty damning account from Jim Comey there about Loretta Lynch, the former Attorney General in the Obama administration, and her handling of the Clinton email investigation. It won't get much attention, but that was pretty damning. Number two,
he said that Loretta Lynch told him, don't call it an investigation,
call it a matter.
Call it a matter.
Right. Call it a matter. And he said he was confused by that and concerned by that. Number two, he also made clear he has turned over all of his documents to the special counsel, which tells you, we don't know where it goes, but it tells you as we speak today, an investigation that was about behavior in 2016. Russian meddling, did anybody in the Trump campaign circle collude or coordinate in any way with the Russians, is now about the conduct of the President of the United States in 2017 in the Oval Office. When your special counsel investigation starts, it's in its early week. As we know from past history, you don't know where it's going to go. The other thing I found interesting is the Republicans did not challenge Jim Comey's account. Nobody said you're not telling the truth. Nobody said this didn't happen. What they tried to say was, well, could you take it in a different context? That this is President Trump, he had fired Michael Flynn, he's a friend, he's a loyalist, cut some guys some slack, not obstruct justice, just sort of be kind. But it is interesting, they didn't say Jim Comey's lying. They essentially said, can we try to interpret this in a way that's much more kind to the president? But they did not challenge the basic facts that he asked for loyalty, that he pulled him aside in the Oval Office after kicking everyone else out of the room and said, can you go easy or do something? And again, this is in a legal context now. People will have to investigate this. Even as they tried to give a kinder view of this for the president, they didn't challenge the facts. They did not say at any point, we don't think you're telling the truth. As a matter of fact, they accepted what he was saying.
And it's going to be a he said versus he said on several of these sensitive points, Nia Malika Henderson. And at one point, Comey said, quote, "Lordy, I hope there are tapes.
That's right, and of course the tapes have come up because Donald Trump said that that Comey should hope there weren't tapes. He put tapes in quotation marks in this Twitter. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who's gaggling today for the president, essentially said she didn't know if there were tapes, said you should talk to the Secret Service. So that's, I think, going to remain a mystery, and we will see going forward what this White House's strategy is on here. We'll hear, of course, from the president's personal attorney. This is this is a new kind of wrinkle in strategy that this White House has, because it's mainly been through Twitter, and there were sort of suggestions that the president might tweet his way through this hearing, live tweeted. That would have been something. I don't think he's tweeted at all, so we'll see this official statement from the lawyer at some point. What was interesting, I think, from the Republicans is they very much wanted to focus on Jim Comey's behavior. Why didn't he resign, for instance? Cotton talked about that because at one point in Comey's career, he did threaten to resign. Why didn't you, alert someone that this was happening? Essentially saying it must not have been such a big deal if you didn't call the president out on the spot even, and Dianne Feinstein got to that too. And she tried to suggest, well, maybe it was because of the Oval Office and it was this grand setting, and he was sort of cowed by that by that setting. So that was really interesting to see what Republicans were doing.
Because he says, I wish I'd been more courageous, maybe. And that he was in the Oval Office.
He wasn't Captain Courageous.
Right, he wasn't Captain Courageous. And maybe he should have been more forthright and stormed down and said, you can't possibly do this. But he admitted, I didn't do that. The other thing that was so interesting was he kept giving us these little breadcrumbs today about areas that perhaps the special counsel will be looking at. And in terms of the Attorney General, Sessions, he said, that his role in the Russia probe may be more problematic than we know, but he could not discuss it publicly. So,
but it was also clear that to the point about why didn't he go to other people. Remember, early on, Barack Obama was still president of the United States. This started under President-elect Trump, and then he said there was nobody confirmed. It was all actings at the Trump Justice Department. So he decided he would keep this to himself until maybe use it down the road. This is again an early chapter.
Can I just say really quickly, big picture? The irony of this whole thing is that the President of the United States, over and over again, was trying to get James Comey to tell the American people that he's not under investigation. And in this hearing, James Comey, purposefully or not, made clear that since the special counsel has the memos about these conversations, that perhaps it wasn't that wasn't so at the time, that the president wasn't a part of the investigation or under investigation, but now he might be because of his attempts to get the FBI director to say publicly that he wasn't.
And Comey repeatedly said, release the memos. I have no problem if the public sees those memos. This Columbia University law professor apparently has those memos. We'll see if they're going to be released.
I'm surprised they weren't angrier about that, actually. But
Anderson, we're standing by. This hearing is about to resume behind closed doors. We're also awaiting a statement from the president's private outside attorney.
Let's listen into Senator Burr.
Investigation into Russian involvement in the 2016 elections. It also enabled the American people to understand the massive amounts of stories that's been out there and to sort through those and to have an individual that can lay some factual context to it. This is nowhere near the end of our investigation. And I think it's safe to say today that next week we hope to work with Special Counsel Mueller to work out clear pathways for both investigations, his and ours, to continue, to work on deconfliction of witnesses and potential testimony. But we're more confident today that we can, through this process, work through a very bipartisan and thorough investigation that at the end of it answers many of the questions that the American people might have today.
I want to simply add, I was very proud of how all of the members conducted themselves today. I thought it was very important that the American people get a chance to hear Jim Comey's statements about what all has transpired. The one thing, even if we may have different views on where some of these questions may lead, the one message that I hope all Americans will take home is recognizing how significant the Russian interference in our electoral process was, how it goes to the core of our democracy, and that we've got to be prepared to make sure that we are in a better defensive position in 2018, 2019, and frankly in my home state as early as next week where we have a primary. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
Senator Burr and Senator Warner, look back now with the panel here in Washington. So many key points today to go over that Jim Comey took what Donald Trump said about Michael Flynn as a directive, that he did not go to Jeff Sessions, he said, because he knew and assumed that Jeff Sessions would have to recuse himself, which Jeff Sessions did some 2 weeks later.
And I think the February 14th meeting remains the focus and the crucial issue in this whole investigation, because that is the most incriminating act that the president took in terms of a possible obstruction of justice case, telling Jim Comey, and Comey clearly felt he was ordered to stop this investigation. Even though the president said, I hope, yes. There was a very interesting exchange with, I'm trying to remember, it was a senator from Maine, Angus King, who they both, the famous line about Thomas A. Becket, who will rid me of this meddlesome priest. You don't tell someone, but you know you send the message. It is also the point where there is the clearest conflict between Comey and Trump.
Because
Trump
the president has
said, I didn't make any sort of order. There was that question at the press conference that we played. So I think, you know, that remains the most important point of conflict. And the other point, I think Dana alluded to this, but I think it's very important, is there was, you know, in the letter that Trump wrote firing Comey, he said, 3 times you told me that I was not under investigation, and that was in May. Well, here we know in June, Donald Trump is under criminal investigation, and that's a big deal, and that's important.
Jim McCaus.
Well, shoot, I'll take it. But that's right. He's a smart guy, too. I just want to focus on what we learned about the various investigations underway from Comey today. One, as Jeffrey said and John King said earlier, that the Flynn Hope comment is clearly under investigation now. Comey said as much. He said, one, it was immediately of investigative interest, which is one reason he didn't go to the Attorney General. Two, he says it's something that the special counsel will look into, and we know because the special counsel has the memos that he is looking into that. So
he also said that he did not inform the investigative team about it because he thought it would have an impact on the investigation.
Exactly, exactly. On the dossier, the famous dossier, which has been dismissed by Republicans and that's been discredited. Fact is, and I've been asking folks involved in this investigation for weeks now, it is not completely dismissed. And Comey said today, in fact, he said, one, I can't comment on open session regarding the dossier. It would have been very easy for him to say, yeah, that's all garbage. But two, towards the end, he said that the issue of whether the Russians have compromising information on the president, still under investigation, still an open question. Towards the end as well, he said that whether members of the Trump team colluded with Russia, members of the Trump team, not Trump himself, still an open investigation. On the issue of whether the president himself colluded with Russia, he said he's not under investigation for it, but when Cotton, a Republican senator, asked him about it, he said, I can't answer it definitively in open session. So again, there's still something there that he can't comment on. So to some degree, it remains an open question. And that's important here because you're going to hear a lot of interpretations from this because people always take from these hearings what they want to hear, that, oh, all this issue is closed, that issue is closed. There are a lot of open questions still, and it may not involve the president today. And to be clear, we should be fair. Comey said that when he left the job, there weren't open investigations of the president. That is key. But if the dossier question is open, if compromising information is open, if Trump team collusion is still an open investigation, there are things that could touch the president that are still open questions.
Laura?
Well, that's exactly right. The open investigation, if he wasn't aware of one at the time he was fired, certainly that raises the interest level of saying, well, maybe that was part of the now investigation as to why Trump was so adamant about having him no longer in office. But what this really did to me thematically for Comey is reiterate, I think, what's going to raise some pretty fair criticism once again, which is he's so interested in being the last line of defense for the credibility of the FBI and inherently himself, that I think at times it undermines his own arguments he's trying to make to show his objectivity. Now, I think what he said was very important today. It illuminated a lot of issues. It did raise other issues. But that will be a criticism that he will continue to get. particularly because the obstruction issue cannot foreseeably go away. It is the beginning of an investigative inquiry. It's not the end of one. But he has positioned himself in a manner that he dons a cape to say, I alone. He started his argument talking about, I was insulted and the FBI was defamed by what happened here, and he goes on to talk about these things. So I think he's going to get the same amount of criticism again, but I did really, from a perspective as a prosecutor, I thought to myself, well, that illuminates an issue, and it shows there's an open door here, and perhaps the president's efforts to deflect attention created roadblocks that will now become insurmountable hurdles for his administration.
Well, Carl, just to Laura's point about criticisms of Comey, the criticism that we've heard from Republicans is obviously going to continue, which is that Comey at no point either said, look, this is obstruction of justice, or at no point seemed to say to the president, this is inappropriate, you should not be doing this. And even to then Attorney General Loretta Lynch, when she was saying you should call the Clinton investigation the Clinton matter, he seemed to accede to what he clearly felt uncomfortable with and knew was an inappropriate suggestion.
He did not come off as a strong man in the instances that you cite. At the same time, he seems to have engineered the appointment of a special counsel, which is quite extraordinary. Why did he do it? Because he thought the president was trying to impede and obstruct this investigation.
To me, it sounded though like a political survivor, someone who was like not confronting directly, but also then engineering
I think there's a bigger question, and that is that not since J. Edgar Hoover has a non-elected official in this country had the power over our political system that James Comey has, and it's something to look at the same time. His testimony was very damning for the President of the United States because it made clear that, and let's see if there are tapes, but it made clear that he thought the president unquestionably was trying to get him to drop a legitimate investigation into a matter of grave national security concern. And now, also under a cloud after this hearing, is Jeff Sessions.
Yeah, well, I mean, just on the, first of all, I would say I think Comey not only answered the questions about Loretta Lynch, but I think he welcomed those questions because it was his way of certifying his role as an independent, not someone who serves one party or the other party.
Right, he got nauseous both about Trump and about Lynch.
It may just be that he has stomach problems.
He does have mild nausea quite often, it seems.
But on the large, let me just talk about the politics of this for a second, because I've never been confronted by as many people who say, well, do you think the president will serve his full term? And I always remind people we're not a parliamentary system. He got elected to a no, I know. And the assumption is that something is going to happen here somehow. I think you saw in this hearing it was very civil, it was respectful, but you saw the Republicans going off to one side, the Democrats going off to the other. The Republicans used the hearing to try and blunt the impact of what Comey had to say. How many times did the president ask you about Flynn? Just once. Did anybody try to stop you from doing what you were doing? No.
By the way, there's Director Comey going to be going to the classified briefing.
And if there was going to be a movement in Congress to act on any of this, and we're way down the road from that, there's going to have to be a lot more for these Republicans to move off a position of defending the president.
I want to continue with our panel, but we got to quickly just go to Jim Acosta. Jim, I understand the White House is responding to something.
That's right. Sarah Huckabee Sanders just held an off-camera gaggle with reporters, and during that gaggle with reporters, Anderson, she was asked this question about Jim Comey's testimony about when he said, "Lordy, I hope there are tapes," in reference to the president's tweet that there might be tapes of these conversations over here between the president and the former FBI director. I asked Sarah Huckabee Sanders directly, does the president have a recording system here at the White House that allows him to record his conversations? And she said basically she has no idea. She was pressed a couple of times on this question. At one point she joked that perhaps they'll have to look under the couches here at the White House for that recording system. So you can tell that they're frustrated and sick and tired of hearing that question, but no definitive answer on that. But there was a very definitive answer when asked during this gaggle whether the president is a liar. Remember, Jim Comey during his testimony said at one point that the Trump administration has been lying about the FBI, lying about me. And here's what Sarah Huckabee Sanders had to say to that.
No, I can definitively say the president's not a liar, and I think it's frankly insulting that that question would be asked.
Now, one other interesting thing to throw out there, Anderson, is the fate of Attorney General Jeff Sessions. You know, over the last 48 hours, the White House has been incapable of saying whether or not the president has confidence in the Attorney General. At this gaggle with reporters, Sarah Sanders did say, yes, the president has confidence in Jeff Sessions. And how do we know that? How does Sarah Sanders know that? She said that she talked to the president about this last night. We should point out, though, in the next half hour or so, we do expect to hear from the president's personal outside counsel, Mark Kasowitz. He's expected to give a statement to reporters. No idea whether he'll take questions, but we should note, Anderson, his outside counsel, the president's outside counsel, Mark Kasowitz, was very confident last night. We understand from talking to a couple of sources, Anderson, that Kasowitz was at the Trump International Hotel here in Washington last night talking about the Comey written testimony and telling people there in the room, quote, "We won, Trump's in the clear, it's clear Trump didn't do anything wrong." He was also apparently buying cigars and handing them out to people. So at this point, Trump's legal team is very confident that the president is not in hot water at this point, Anderson.
It's interesting, Jim. It took Sarah Huckabee Sanders 48 hours to find the confidence the president has in the Attorney General. They could find out whether there are tapes or not very easily. I mean, the president would know. I assume Reince Priebus would know. There's, you know,
he's been
known
to use a cell phone to tape people.
Anderson and Carl, the information flow here at the White House is as stovepiped as you will ever see it. It appears to be one stovepipe from the staff to the president. And it is question by question. Last week, it was whether or not the president believes in climate change. Anderson, we have not gotten an answer to that question because Sean Spicer told reporters, and a number of people told reporters, well, I haven't had a chance to ask the president that question. They can't definitively answer that question. And then the same thing happened with Jeff Sessions. Does the president have confidence in Jeff Sessions? It took 48 hours for us to get an answer to that question. Sarah Sanders says she had to personally go to the president to get a response to that last night. And my guess is, Anderson, is whether or not there is a taping system here at the White House that the president installed to tape his conversations. Remember, as he did as a private citizen from time to time at Trump Tower, he would record his conversations. We are not going to get a definitive answer to that question unless he's asked in public. Right. Or if one of these aides goes to him and settles it once and for all.
Which we should point out, this is all a subject because the president himself brought it up and tweeted about. Carl, to your point, he as a private citizen, you said he used to.
Yeah, he used his cell phone to tape people on occasion. That's definitively established. Yeah.